So we're talking about abundant life this morning. We're talking about something that happens between us and Jesus where we haul up so much that we just can't fit it into our boat. We have to call another boat to come up alongside. And it's one thing to believe that happens, that Jesus is the source of abundant life. It's another thing to experience it. So we're just going to unpack all of that a little bit. To get into this, I want to show you this text that doesn't immediately seem related at all. This is really interesting to me. This is from Matthew 24. Then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. So what Jesus is talking about here is the end of the world. And then all the peoples of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. The people will mourn when they see the Son of Man. Do you know, it's like sometimes when something so powerful happens and you just or something so true and you just realize, I have missed the boat on this. Like I've been living my life for so many years in a certain kind of way, and then you see some kind of truth revealed that you just never got before, and it's like this sense of mourning because you've just missed it. Like when Isaiah came up to the throne of God. I don't know if you know that passage, but when Isaiah saw God sitting on his throne, Isaiah said, woe is me, woe is me. Great glory. And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. So Jesus is just like, there is going to be an end of the world, just confirming that. That's what he's doing here. There will be an end to everything that you know. But now he says this, listen to this. But about that day, about that hour, no one knows. Not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, he's talking about himself, but only the Father. Jesus is being real clear that we are never going to know when the world's going to end. He's saying, look, I'm Jesus, and I don't know when the world's going to end. So don't ever be preoccupied in your life of when the world is going to end. Now, some Christians teach that they know when the world's going to end. You've heard the world's going to end here, 2002, 2000, whatever it is. I think sometimes when we teach that we know when the world's going to end, it creates a buzz, it creates some excitement. But Jesus is like, no, we don't know when the world's going to end. Now, here's the question that gets to the heart of the end of the world as well as what abundance means. Here's the question. If you knew the world was going to end this year, if you knew your life was going to end this month, or maybe tomorrow, how would that change the way you live? If you knew the end was imminent, how would it change the way that you live? There's this rock band called Nickelback. Many of us aren't Nickelback fans. But they have this song that is a great song. It's called If Today Was Your Last Day. Here's just a couple of the lyrics. What would you do? Donate every dime you have? Would you call old friends you never see? Reminisce old memories? Would you forgive your enemies? What Jesus is just trying to unpack for us is this. We don't know when the world's going to end, but I want you to live as though the world is ending tomorrow, because if you do, you are going to live differently. You are going to tell people you love them more. You are going to care more about certain things. It gives you a perspective about what's important and what's not important in your life. And all Jesus is saying, spoiler alert, all he's saying is that if you live that way, there will be abundance in your life. If you knew you were going to die tomorrow, everything would change, and you'd speak to people differently, and you'd share with you what you have more with people. Everything would just change. And Jesus is saying, if you find a way to live your life like that, your life would be abundant. Here's one way to put it. Don't keep waiting to do what you know you should do. Simple. Don't keep waiting to do what you know you should do. And if you knew your life was going to end this month, that's how you would live. And if you live in that way, you'll have abundance. Like if we just look back on your life and you say, everything that I used to care about, like career, money, prestige, all of this stuff, it's just done. It's all done. Now I'm going to look this way and I'm going to see what's really important in life. And once I see what's really important in life, it's going to change my behavior. And once that happens, abundance starts to flow. And Jesus is like, why don't you start doing that now? Why don't you just start living like that now? Let me ask you this. How do you feel when you bring a family a box of food and that family doesn't have anything to eat? Have you ever done that? Maybe not exactly. And the kids run up and they're just wide-eyed because in that box is eggs and milk and meat and maybe even cookies, and the kids are just so excited. How does that make you feel? What happens to your heart at that moment is God's promised abundance. How do you feel when someone forgives you for some past hurt that you inflicted upon them? They just come up and they just say, look, life's too short. I just want to have a relationship again. Let's get on with it. And then you embrace in the spirit of that forgiveness. How do you feel? What happens to your heart when that happens is God's promised abundance. How do you feel when a young person that you've been working with for years, and this young person has been struggling for a long, long time, and then one morning they message you, and it's a simple message. It just says, I'd like to join the church. What happens to your heart at that moment is God's promised abundance. Jesus says several times in the Gospels, I come to give life, but not just life. I come to give abundant life. And we're like, man, in this divided world, how does that happen? I spend all my time just trying to keep my mouth is below the water, but if I can keep my nose above the water, that's all I'm trying to do. And here's Jesus saying, I come to give life, not just life, but abundance. And it's symbolized in this story where these fishermen who aren't even disciples obey what Jesus teaches them to do, and they haul up this massive net of fish. It's too big to fit into their boat. That's what symbolizes the abundance. And it doesn't have anything to do with the afterlife. It doesn't have anything to do with a vision of what comes in the future. It has everything to do with something happening today, right? It happened to them today. And Jesus said, that's how abundant life comes. So ultimately, this is why we follow Jesus. We don't follow Jesus because we're afraid of going to hell. I hope. We don't follow Jesus because it's tradition. We don't follow Jesus because it's just the right thing to do. It's almost like going to some boring class. Like when I was a kid, I had history, and history was really boring, which is really, really sad because history is anything but boring, but it was boring when I was a kid. But you know it's the right thing to do. You just have to sit through the boring class. But is it exciting? Does it restore your heart? No. We follow Jesus because we believe that Jesus leads us to a place of abundance. That's our motive for following. It's interesting that when you go through the gospel stories, Jesus talks about this life like 95% of the time, and he talks about heaven 5% of the time. Jesus believed in heaven, and Jesus believed that heaven is really important. And we just saw where Jesus gives a vision of the end of the world. But that's just a slice of the pie that Jesus brings. Jesus, most of the pie is all about how we act today. Like that's who Jesus is. He says, heaven's important, but what I want to do is I want to bring you abundance right now. I want to bring you abundance when you leave this worship service today. And then he says, I'll show you how to do it. And it's not that complicated. Now, we misunderstand abundance. We just do. Sometimes we think that abundance means if I follow Jesus, everything will go my way. We think that sometimes. If I follow Jesus, I'll have money, I'll have the right relationships, I'll have the career I want, I'll have my health. Those are the big four: money, relationships I want, health, career. If I become a Christian, like that will be the abundance in my life. Sometimes we can think that way. What Peter and James and John and these fishermen who weren't even disciples yet, what they gained was clearly nothing even close to that. Listen to this. Luke, this is verse 11. They gave up everything they had. See how different that is? They gave up everything they had. It's kind of like, okay, Jesus, you had me for a while. Like, I'm going to listen to your sermon, Jesus, and because I'm kind of curious around what you consider abundant life, because I kind of want, and so I'm going to, and then now you've lost me. You lost me. Like, you're promising me abundance, but now you're saying I'm going to have to give everything up. Like, what about receiving all the things I want? Right? We all fall into that. The fishermen, they met Jesus on the shore. Something happened. And I'm just going to go through a few of those sequence of events just in the next 2 minutes. Something happened that left them, this is the word. Listen, look at this word. It left them astonished. Don't you just want to be astonished in your life? Don't you just want to get up in the morning and have something so good and so beautiful right in front of you that you are just astonished? Don't you want to just live your life in the spirit of astonishment? They were astonished for what happened with Jesus. How do I join that experience? I want to be astonished too. I want my net to be full of fish. So there's a couple of things I just want to show you. These fishermen and Simon. Simon became Peter, but here he's still Simon because he's not even a disciple yet. He does something to create the right environment in which Jesus can work. So here's the scene. Jesus is teaching outside, gets in the boat, knows the laws of physics. His voice carries better across the water. He's sitting in the boat. After he's done teaching, they go out into deep water. Nice little metaphor there. Simon, take the boat out into deep water. We're going to go a little bit deeper. They go out in deep water. Then Jesus tells Simon to do something. Throw your net out one more time. And they're like, oh, man. And you can relate to this. Simon's like, we've been working all day. You want us to do this one more time? We've been working all day. Man, here's what Simon says. If you had any idea of how much time I've prayed about this and thought about this, even though it seems so simple, here's what Simon says when Jesus says, cast your net out. He says, I've been working all day, but because you say so, Jesus, because you say so, I'll let the nets down one more time. Okay, listen. Two things, and this is what everything revolves around. First thing is, there are a lot of voices in our life that we need to listen to. There's voices of culture telling us to do this. There's voices that say you need career. There's voices that say you need money. There's voices that say you need to be successful. So when people look at you, they can look up and not. There's all these voices that swirl around us. And Jesus is one voice amidst all those voices. And what Simon does is he chooses to listen to what Jesus tells him to do. He chooses to listen to that voice. You see, it's one thing to believe, please listen to this. It's one thing to believe that love will produce abundance. It's another thing to experience that love produces abundance. And what Simon shows us is that the only way we can experience it is to listen to what Jesus tells us to do. That's why he got the net of fish. He hauls it up. It's too big. You got to call another boat in. He listened to the direction. I mean, we come to church and we listen to this and we listen to that, and I'm all just about theory. I'm the theory guy. All I do is talk. Jesus says this, Jesus says that. It's one thing to hear what Jesus says. It's another thing even to believe in what he says. It's another thing altogether to put it into practice. You know what? When I look around in this room and I look at you all sitting here, I see so many of you who have done that. I could just start naming names as I look around. Maybe that's why this church has abundance. I don't know. Simon did one more thing. Because he wasn't yet a disciple. He wasn't even a Jesus follower. Why did he listen to Jesus? I think it was just a leap of faith. He wanted to believe that it was true. He took a leap of faith. Maybe there's someone today who isn't a Jesus follower. Maybe could be inspired by Simon just saying, look, there are crowds around this guy. Something's going on. You know, people are looking, they're curious, they're not Jesus followers, but the reason that there are thousands of people around is something's happening with this guy. And so Simon just takes this leap of faith, and 10 minutes later, he's happy he did. In the Beaver Valley, there's this trail that goes up to a place called Old Baldy. Lots of you know what Old Baldy is. Old Baldy's about a 150-meter cliff, and you can walk up, and you can just walk right up along the edge of it, and it's a beautiful view of the Beaver Valley. When we were kids, we used to go. When Ian was small, and I always remember my dad, he was just always nervous up there because the kids running around, and there's like this cliff, you know. My dad always nervous. But you'd go up, and there'd be this gorgeous, at this time of year, it would be a nice time to go up with the colors. We were up there once, and there was this guy standing on the edge of the cliff. And he had like a hand glider thing over a big hand. It was huge. Must have been about 12 feet long. And he was just standing there. And we're like kind of watching him, and we just assume that he's just waiting for the right moment, maybe when the wind is right, or he'll just jump off. And we're just watching him kind of transfixed, and then all of a sudden, ever so suddenly, he steps back about 3 feet, and then he just runs, and he jumps off the cliff. And he fell just straight down, just like, whew. And we're like, oh my gosh, he just fell straight down. 4 or 5 seconds later, we saw him again. And this time he was going up, because the wind had caught his sails. And I was just standing there watching this guy. He's just like going up into the blue sky, so free and so wild and so full of adventure, because somehow he knew that if he jumped, there would be something that would catch his sails. He knew that. Now, for you, maybe you're less sure if you take a leap. Maybe you're less sure if anything will catch your sails. It reminds me of those incredible stories of all our forefathers, immigrants who came to Canada. Many of them came from the old world in Europe to the new world. They had to leave everything behind, just like the disciples. But you know what? They never looked back, because they had a vision for a new world that was just full of new life and new adventure and new opportunity and new dreams. They never looked back. The covered wagons, those stories of pioneers heading out west to Alberta or to Wyoming or to California, and these lines of covered wagons. And oftentimes they had all their stuff with them, but they'd have to dump all their stuff along the way, throw out the piano, throw out the heirloom, throw out the furniture to get through the pass. They couldn't make it without dumping all their stuff out. These incredible stories of these people who just left everything behind because they had been astonished by the dream of something new. Don't you want to just live your life in astonishment? It's always my prayer here at this church that we can be a part of this church not because we're afraid of going to hell, or not because it's a religious duty, or not because it's tradition, or not even because we just think it's the right thing to do. I want us to belong to this church and be followers of Jesus because we believe at the end of that road there is an abundance that we'll have to call other boats in to take up. That's why we all should be here. It's clear enough that for Jesus, money, comfort, high social status, none of those things were significant. None of those things meant anything. He led his followers onto a road that clearly showed them that. The abundance of Jesus can only be found when the love of God is practiced. It's in the face of that child when you come to that house and you put down that box of food, and it's what happens to your heart. It's in that warm hug that you get from someone when they forgive you from a hurt long ago and you have reconciliation. It's what happens to your heart. And it's when Jesus finally does come back and brings the whole kingdom of heaven with him, there will be a day when Jesus will come back and bring everything back with him that we can finally see with our own eyes. It's what happens to your heart. That's God's abundance. So we take a leap into it. And we too are astonished.